They've been romanticized in books, songs, and films. But the truth about pirates is far darker, far stranger. Picture this. You're thousands of miles from land, surrounded by endless waves, trapped aboard a creaking wooden ship with cutthroats and killers, men who'd gut you for looking the wrong way. There are no laws here, only the captain's word. And when that word turns against you, the punishments are brutal. Forget walking the plank. What you're about to hear makes that look merciful. From skin-shredding whips to sun-baked executions and torture games that blur the line between madness and entertainment. This is the forgotten world of pirate justice.
Back in the 17th century, the oceans were a lawless frontier. Whoever ruled the sea ruled the world. Pirate captains weren't just robbers with ships. They were warlords, governors, and executioners. They walked a constant tightrope between justice and tyranny, balancing the loyalty of their crew with fear and discipline.
Because on a pirate ship, there were no jails, only punishments. Without structure, a crew could dissolve into mutiny and madness. They were trapped together in the middle of the vast blue nothingness. If order collapsed, there was nowhere to run, no escape. That's why pirate captains were known for their creativity and brutality. Discipline came in many forms. Some were simple warnings, others were unforgettable. Let's begin with one of the most common pirate punishments, flogging. A sailor caught stealing from the ship's provisions, or perhaps striking another man without cause, would be brought forward in front of the entire crew. The punishment would be administered by the quartermaster, not the captain. And he would carry a cat o' nine tails. This was no ordinary whip, made from 9 separate cords of thick rope, each lined with sharp knots or bits of metal. The cat o' nine tails left deep, bloody ridges. The pain was unbearable. Many sailors bit down on a lead bullet just to keep from screaming. But some failed and earned mocking nicknames like Nightingale, a cruel reminder of their cries. Still, flogging was only the beginning, just a taste of what could come next. While flogging left marks on the skin, other punishments went deeper, straight to the bone, both literally and metaphorically. One of the cruelest forms of control was known among pirates as clapping in irons. It sounds simple. A set of heavy iron restraints, often locked around the wrists or ankles. But aboard a swaying ship in open waters, it became a slow, grinding torture. The condemned was thrown into a dark, airless compartment, usually below deck, where they'd lie in damp filth, chained and forgotten. Sometimes there wasn't even a proper cell. The prisoner would be shoved into a storm-soaked corner, lashed in place with nothing but the rolling sea and thunder above. No food, no water, just the icy touch of metal, tightening with every wave. The iron would dig into their skin until it blistered, bled, and bruised. Wrists snapped from the force of crashing waves, ankles shattered, bones slowly breaking over hours. And the worst part, every crew member knew the man in irons was still there, moaning, screaming, begging. It was a message to the rest. Step out of line, and this is your future. But not all punishments came from the top. Sometimes it was the crew who turned to cruelty. Torture games born from boredom and madness. One infamous ritual was called blooding and sweating. The captive, whether a prisoner or a disobedient sailor, was forced to run between 2 rows of pirates. Each man was armed, a cutlass, a dagger, a sail needle. And as the poor souls staggered past them, they were stabbed and slashed on every side. The air would be filled with cheers, music, and drunken laughter. Someone might play a fiddle, another would chant a sea shanty. To the pirates, it was sport. To the victim, a living nightmare. If they made it through, they were often tossed overboard anyway, or kept alive just long enough to entertain the crew again. Pain was a pastime, and mercy was rare. For pirates, death wasn't always quick. Sometimes it came slowly, out under the burning sun with the taste of salt on your tongue and the sound of your own heartbeat echoing in your ears. This was marooning. When a pirate had outlived his usefulness, or when the ship could no longer feed every mouth on board, a decision would be made. The man would be taken to a deserted island. No shelter, no food, no company. If the crew was feeling generous, he might be given a keg of water, or a bottle of rum, a pistol, a single shot. That was the kindest part. He could use it on the first snake he saw, or on himself. Most of the time he was stripped of his clothing, left bare to the elements, scorched by the sun by day, frozen by night, surrounded by endless sea, left to count the days until thirst or madness claimed him. Some begged for a bullet, others accepted their fate with eerie calm. And yet, not every marooning ended in death.
But that was rare. Most marooned men died within days, and for some captives, marooning wasn't even an option. When pirate ships overflowed with prisoners, especially enslaved people taken during raids, there was no hesitation. They were thrown overboard. One of the worst recorded cases was the Zong Massacre. In 1781, a British slave ship ran low on supplies, so over 100 enslaved Africans were cast into the sea to drown. Their deaths were calculated, filed as a loss on insurance claims. Even the pirates had learned this trick. Life was cheap, water and gold were not. And still, there were darker punishments ahead.
Because the infamous walk the plank, that wasn't myth, it just wasn't common. And when it did happen, it was terrifying. Walking the plank. It's one of the most famous pirate punishments in pop culture. But the truth, it was rare, reserved for spectacle, for show. When it did happen, it wasn't nearly as theatrical as in the movies. It was cruel, cold, silent. The condemned was bound, hands tied, sometimes weighted, a cannonball chained to their ankles, the plank extended just past the edge of the ship. The crew would stand back, silent or grinning, and the victim would walk, step by step, into the deep. Most couldn't swim, and even if they could, ropes, chains, and the open sea guaranteed only one end. The ocean swallowed them whole. Some say it was Stede Bonnet, the so-called gentleman pirate, who made walking the plank a twisted form of entertainment for his bored crew. According to legend, it was often used on sailors accused of drunkenness or cowardice. But there were many other brutal fates, and some were written down. Infamous captains like Bartholomew Roberts, also known as Black Bart, drafted detailed pirate codes. These weren't just guidelines, they were sacred laws at sea. Break them, and your punishment was swift. If a pirate stole from another crew member, he'd have his ears and nose cut off, then be marooned. If he was caught deserting or plotting mutiny, he'd be subjected to something far worse, drying out in the sun. This meant being tied to the mast or any exposed part of the ship for days at a time. No food, no water, no shelter. The tropical sun would burn the skin to blisters. Salt air would sting every inch. Tongues swelled, eyes cracked. By the end of it, the mind would drift far from the body, if the body hadn't already given up. And then there were the victims nailed to the ship's tide line, where rising waters would come slowly, steadily, hour by hour. If the sun didn't kill them, the sea did. In pirate justice, there were no trials, only fear, only spectacle, and the worst was still to come. If you were a pirate, there was one punishment whispered more than any other, a word that made even the hardest men shudder. Keel hauling. This was not just a death sentence. It was a display. The victim was stripped naked, bound with heavy chains, and sometimes tied to cannonballs for weight. Then, he was lowered over one side of the ship and dragged beneath the keel, the sharp, barnacle-encrusted spine of the vessel, until he emerged on the other side. If he didn't drown, the barnacles would shred his flesh. Limbs were torn open, faces were unrecognizable, eyes gone, skin in ribbons. Sometimes they survived, just barely. And if they did, the captain might order it again. The bleeding, broken sailor would then be hoisted high above the deck and left hanging from the yardarm, his ruined body swaying in the wind like a flag. A warning, a threat, a message to every man aboard. Don't even think about it.
Keel hauling was used by pirates, but also navies, dating back to ancient Greece as early as 700 BCE. But in the golden age of piracy, it became a nightmare legend. And the men who carried it out, they weren't just pirates, they were butchers of the sea. One of the most vicious was Charles Vane. He was known for hanging, beating, and burning prisoners alive. One man was tied to the bowsprit and tortured with lit matches, slow and deliberate. Then came Black Bart, the very pirate who wrote the pirate code. He once cut the ears off Dutch prisoners, then hung their bodies for sport. Even the governor of Martinique wasn't safe. Bart had him hanged too. But none of them compared to Edward Lowe. Between 1721 and 1724, Lowe racked up a list of atrocities so vile they were hard to believe. He cut the lips off a Portuguese captain, burned them in front of him, and forced another man to eat his own ears. One victim had his heart cut out, which was then fed to a fellow prisoner. These were not outlaws with honor. These were men who ruled by terror. And yet, even their reign couldn't last forever. The British Admiralty eventually empowered the East India Company to hunt pirates, to try them, and to hang them. Pardons were sometimes offered, but rarely, and only to those with clean hands or very young faces. Just as pirates made examples of their enemies, the empires made examples of pirates. And so the Golden Age came to a close. But their stories, their punishments, they live on, etched into the waves, waiting in the deep to be told again.
Thanks for sailing with us on this haunting voyage through history. If you've enjoyed this journey through punishment and power on the high seas, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to learn more with us, and tell us, who do you think was the most brutal pirate of all time? Let us know in the comments, and maybe, just maybe, we'll make a video on them next. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.